Welcome back to Amelia Voice, the channel where stories meet secrets and life unfolds in ways you'd never expect. Today, I'm sharing something personal, something that still sends a chill down my spine whenever I think about it. My brother inherited our parents' $2 million mansion, a sprawling estate that stood like a monument to our family's legacy. Everyone thought he was the lucky one, the golden child who got the dream house with marble floors, chandeliers that glistened like diamonds, and a driveway that could fit an entire car dealership. He strutted around like a king after the will was read, already making renovation plans, talking about hosting parties and modernizing the place. But what no one knew, what not even he realized, was that I had inherited something far more powerful: the land it all stood on. When my parents' lawyer handed me a sealed envelope after the funeral, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just another condolence letter or maybe a personal note from Mom, who always believed in private gestures instead of public displays. But when I opened it and saw the property deed with my name on it, not the house, but the land, I almost dropped it in disbelief. The attorney's quiet smirk should have been my first clue that this story wasn't as simple as it looked. My brother Daniel was too busy basking in attention to notice anything strange. He moved in the next week, already bragging on social media about his new estate, tagging himself in photos of the gardens, the infinity pool, the home gym that Dad had spent years designing. He didn't invite me to see it, not that I expected him to. Daniel and I had always been different. He was the charming one, the talker, the favorite. I was the quiet planner, the observer in the shadows. Growing up, he got the new cars, the best schools, the praise. I got the lessons, the warnings, the responsibility. But my parents knew something about Daniel that no one else did. They knew he'd never understand the weight of legacy, only the thrill of ownership. And that's why they left the mansion to him. But the land, the actual power beneath it, to me. For weeks, I didn't say anything. I let him enjoy his fantasy. He threw lavish parties, spent money like water, hired interior designers who replaced everything with modern furniture that looked sterile and soulless. The mansion's warmth, the one my mother had cultivated with antiques and soft lights, was fading. Every time I passed by the property, I could see the house glowing in the night, loud music echoing through the hills. It was as if Daniel was trying to erase every trace of our parents, as if the mansion was his stage, and he was finally the star he'd always believed he deserved to be. But one thing he didn't realize was that the very foundation under his precious home, the soil, the boundaries, the land his mansion depended on, was mine. And in legal terms, that meant his ownership was complicated. When I met with the lawyer again to confirm the paperwork, he leaned forward and said, "You have full control, Amelia. He can own the structure, but without your permission, he can't modify or even sell it." My heart raced. I could hardly believe it. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. All those years of feeling small next to my brother melted away. I had the upper hand, and he had no idea. I watched him dig himself deeper into the illusion of control, spending recklessly on landscaping, hiring a crew to expand the driveway, even planning to build a guest house, all without realizing he was technically altering property that wasn't his. I knew I should tell him that it was only fair, but something inside me, maybe a mix of justice and long-buried resentment, whispered, "Wait." And so I waited, until one day his arrogance crossed a line. He called me to boast about how he was finally making the place better than Mom ever did, laughing about tearing down her favorite oak tree to open up the view. That was it. That oak tree had been our mother's favorite spot, the one place she always said carried her heart. I drove to the mansion that evening, the sun bleeding into the horizon, and saw the tree half gone, the trunk splintered, the roots exposed like raw nerves. Something in me snapped. I walked straight up the marble steps and rang the bell. When Daniel opened the door, his smile faltered. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" he asked, still holding a champagne glass. I looked him in the eyes and said calmly, "I'm here because I think you've forgotten something very important. You might own this house, Daniel, but it stands on my land." His face froze, confusion clouding his smugness. He laughed it off at first, But when I handed him the copy of the deed, the color drained from his face. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the realization dawning that every wall, every room, every luxurious inch of that mansion was sitting on property he didn't control. And that meant every move he made from that day forward, every plan, every party, every brag, depended entirely on me. The air between us turned thick, almost electric, as Daniel stared at the deed in disbelief. He blinked several times, trying to process what he was seeing, and then looked up at me with that same arrogant smirk I'd known all my life. The one that said, "I'll find a way to win." "You're bluffing," he scoffed, tossing the papers onto the console table like they were meaningless. But his voice cracked just enough to tell me he wasn't sure. "The land? Really? That doesn't even make sense." I crossed my arms, calm and quiet, the way I always had to be growing up. "It makes perfect sense if you knew Mom and Dad as well as you claim to," I said. "They trusted you with the house because they knew you needed something to hold on to. But they trusted me with the ground beneath it, because they knew I'd protect what mattered." His jaw clenched, his confidence slipping like sand through his fingers. He turned and poured himself another glass of champagne, pretending I wasn't there, but his hand shook slightly as he lifted the bottle. "You think you can control me?" he muttered, eyes fixed on the bubbles rising to the surface. "You think you can just show up here and what? Tell me I'm squatting?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence is sometimes the loudest weapon. I simply picked up the deed again and placed it neatly on the marble counter. "I'm not here to argue, Daniel," I said softly. "I'm just making sure you understand the reality of the situation. You own the house. But the moment you step outside these walls, you're standing on my property. Every inch of it." The way his face twisted, pride fighting with fear, was almost satisfying. For years he'd made me feel invisible. Now, for the first time, he was the one cornered. He tried to recover, his voice sharp. "You wouldn't do anything drastic, Amelia. You're too soft. Always have been." But I just smiled. "Maybe I used to be." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and Daniel? You might want to hold off on that guest house project. You'd need the landowner's permission for that. You'll find out soon enough who that is." Then I left him standing there, speechless, the echo of my footsteps filling the massive hallway that once felt like home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of my parents weighed heavy on my chest. I wondered if this was what they wanted, for me to learn strength through control, or for him to finally face consequences. Either way, the game had begun, and Daniel wasn't the kind to back down easily. The next few weeks proved that. He started acting strange. At first, he tried charm, calling me out of the blue, pretending to check on me, inviting me to dinner at the mansion as if we were suddenly family again. I declined every time. Then came the manipulation. He sent me photos of the house, saying things like, "It feels empty without you here," or "Mom would want us to share this place." I could see right through it. But when he realized sweet talk wouldn't work, the mask slipped. One morning, I received a letter from his lawyer, a notice claiming exclusive rights to the property improvements. It was laughable, really. My own lawyer sent him a polite but firm reminder that the land remained legally and irrevocably mine. That's when Daniel stopped pretending. The next day, I drove past the mansion just to clear my head, and what I saw made my stomach turn. He had started construction anyway. Heavy machinery dug into the earth near the back garden, the same garden where my mother's roses once bloomed. The same spot where we used to sit as kids, eating popsicles and watching the sunset. It was now a muddy battlefield of greed and ego. I got out of my car, walked up to the foreman, and introduced myself as the property owner. The man looked confused but respectful. Within minutes, the entire crew stopped working. When Daniel came storming out of the mansion, red-faced and furious, I was already waiting. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he yelled. "Stopping you from making another mistake," I replied evenly. "You're trespassing, Daniel. Every piece of machinery on this soil is here illegally." He laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from desperation. "You wouldn't dare shut this down. You'd ruin everything." "No," I said, stepping closer. You did that the moment you ignored the truth." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the sister he thought he could control. Then he muttered something I'll never forget. "You don't deserve this land. You never did. You were always just the background." I felt that sting deep inside, the same sting I'd felt since childhood. But instead of breaking, I hardened. "Maybe," I said, "but the background holds everything together." I turned, signaled to the foreman, and said, "Pack it up." Within an hour, the trucks were gone, the machines silent, and the mansion once again stood alone, perched like a king without a kingdom. Daniel's glare followed me as I drove away, but there was something else in his eyes this time. Not just anger, fear. Because for the first time in his life, he realized he couldn't charm, buy, or bully his way out of this. I held the power, and there was nothing he could do about it. Or at least that's what I thought then. I didn't know he was already planning his next move. Something darker, something he'd been hiding. And soon, the fight over land and legacy would turn into something far more dangerous than I ever expected. The first clue that Daniel was planning something came quietly, in the form of silence. Weeks went by without a single message from him. No calls, no letters, no passive-aggressive posts online. It was eerie. My brother was never one to stay quiet. His ego demanded an audience. So when the noise stopped, I knew it wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. I kept tabs on the property through public records and discreet drives by the mansion. From the road, it still looked picture-perfect. Every light on, every blade of grass trimmed, as if nothing had changed. But there was a strange energy about it, something that made my stomach twist. The curtains were always drawn now, even during the day, and sometimes I'd see shadows moving inside long after midnight. Once, I swore I saw a flicker of blue light from the basement windows, a glow that wasn't there before. My curiosity battled with my instinct to stay away, but one evening, as rain poured down like needles, I got a call that made the decision for me. It was from Mr. Halbrook, the old family attorney who'd handled our parents' estate. His voice was tight, uneasy. "Amelia," he said, "has Daniel contacted you about refinancing the property?" My blood went cold. "Refinancing? He can't. He doesn't own the land." "That's what I told the bank," Halbrook said gravely. "But he's been creative. He's trying to use the mansion itself as collateral. Claims he has full jurisdiction because the deed is under his name. But there's more. He's moving money fast, and there's a company involved that doesn't exist on paper." My heart pounded. "What do you mean, doesn't exist?" He sighed. "It's a shell, Amelia. Something he set up himself. It's like he's planning to sell off part of the property, or at least make it look like he can." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Daniel was playing a dangerous game, and if he succeeded, I could lose everything. Not just the land, but the legacy our parents meant to protect. I grabbed my coat, keys, and the original deed, and drove straight to the mansion through the storm. The driveway was slick and empty, but the house was ablaze with light. I didn't even knock. I pushed open the door and called his name. "Daniel!" My voice echoed through the grand hall, bouncing off marble and emptiness. For a moment, I thought the place was deserted, until I heard faint music coming from the basement. I followed the sound, my heart thudding with each step down the spiral staircase. The air grew damp and cold, the walls humming faintly. The basement door was slightly ajar, light spilling out like a pulse. Inside, I found him, sitting at our father's old desk, surrounded by papers, open laptops, and documents covered in red ink. He looked up, startled, but then grinned, like a predator caught mid-hunt. "Amelia," he said smoothly, "I was just about to call you." "Don't," I snapped. "What are you doing?" He leaned back, completely calm. "Fixing what's mine." I stepped closer, scanning the papers. Mortgage applications, forged contracts, wire transfers, all in his handwriting. "You're insane," I said, grabbing a folder. "This is fraud, Daniel. You can't use this property as leverage. You don't own it." His grin widened and he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You keep saying that, but tell me something, little sister. If no one knows you own it, does it even matter? The words hit like a slap. You think you can erase me? He shrugged. Already did. I filed everything under my company's name. I've got the signatures, the documents, the right connections. You? You're just a name on an old piece of paper. By the time anyone figures it out, I'll have liquidated half the estate. My hands trembled, fury boiling inside me. You've lost it, I said. This isn't about the house anymore, is it? You just can't stand that they trusted me more than you. His expression darkened. They didn't trust you. They pitied you. You were always the fragile one, the backup plan in case I failed. I felt something inside me crack, the years of buried anger rising all at once. You don't get it, do you? They saw through you long ago. You're not the heir, Daniel. You're the warning. The words sliced through the room. For a moment he looked wounded. Then something sinister replaced it. If you want to play this game, he said quietly, then let's play. Before I could react, he grabbed one of the folders, tore out the last page, and lit it with a candle flame. The fire caught fast, devouring the paper. You can't stop me, he said, eyes gleaming with madness. I lunged forward, slapping the burning page onto the floor and stomping it out. Enough, I shouted. This ends now. He smirked again. You don't even know how deep this goes, Amelia. You think it's about land and houses? No, this is about control. And I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. I left before I did something I'd regret. The storm outside had turned violent, thunder cracking as I ran to my car. I could barely breathe. His words echoed in my mind. You don't even know how deep this goes. What did that mean? Was he bluffing, or had he really dug into something darker? I didn't know. But as I drove home, headlights slicing through sheets of rain, I couldn't shake the image of that basement, the glowing laptops, the fake documents, the look in his eyes. Something told me Daniel's obsession wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, and he was willing to destroy everything, even our family's name, to get it. And as the thunder rolled behind me, one truth settled in my chest like ice. I wasn't just fighting for land anymore. I was fighting for the legacy itself, and my brother had just declared war. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of my old house made me think of Daniel's eyes in that dim basement. Wild, hollow, desperate. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside me only grew louder. I brewed a cup of coffee, but my hands shook so much I spilled half of it before taking a sip. The documents I'd rescued from his desk were spread across my kitchen table. Fake deeds, fake signatures, corporate names that didn't exist. It was a labyrinth of lies, and my brother was at the center of it, spinning threads of deceit like a spider waiting for me to get caught. But the thing about webs is this: if you pull the right thread, the whole thing collapses. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to expose him. Not just for me, but for Mom and Dad, for the legacy he was trying to burn to the ground. I started with the fake company, Holdings Inc. It sounded legitimate. But one call to the state registrar confirmed what I suspected. It was unlisted, unlicensed, and completely fabricated. Then I traced the bank account tied to the mortgage applications. It led to an offshore branch where transactions had been flagged for unusual activity. Daniel wasn't just reckless anymore. He was criminal. Still, I knew confronting him again would be useless. He'd lie, manipulate, and twist every truth until it suited him. So I went to the one person who'd always played by the rules, Mr. Halbrook. When I arrived at his office, he looked exhausted, eyes heavy behind his glasses. "You've seen what he's doing, haven't you?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I tried to warn him, Amelia, but he doesn't listen to reason anymore. He's leveraged everything, even the family trust." My breath caught. The trust? That's illegal. Exactly, Halbrook said. He's betting on a sale that can't happen. And when it fails, everything collapses. He leaned forward, voice low. "You need to act fast. File a claim of ownership enforcement before he transfers anything. You have full rights to the land. Legally, you can freeze all transactions connected to it." That same day, I filed the claim. It was the boldest move I'd ever made, and by nightfall the mansion's assets were locked. Daniel must have realized it immediately, because my phone exploded with calls. I didn't answer. Then came the messages, at first pleading, then furious, then chillingly calm. "You think you've won," one of them read. "You've only delayed what's inevitable." I ignored him, though my hands shook every time I saw his name flash across my screen. But it wasn't until 2 days later that everything turned dark. I came home from work to find my front door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke. My documents, the ones I'd gathered against Daniel, were gone. My computer, too. On the kitchen counter, a single note lay folded neatly, written in his unmistakable handwriting. "You don't deserve to hold what you can't protect." I felt my knees weaken. He'd been inside my home. The realization sent panic coursing through me, but right behind the fear came fury. I wasn't backing down. I drove straight to the mansion again, my headlights cutting through the darkness. This time I didn't hesitate. I stormed through the gates and up the steps, pounding on the door until my fists hurt. When Daniel opened it, he looked different, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, a wild energy radiating off him like static. "You broke into my house," I hissed. "You stole my files." He smiled faintly, leaning against the doorframe. "I didn't steal anything that wasn't mine to begin with." "You crossed a line," I snapped. "I've already filed ownership enforcement. The law's on my side." He laughed then, a low, unsettling sound that didn't sound human anymore. "The law? Amelia, you still think this is about the law?" He stepped closer. "This isn't about deeds or titles. This is about power. The kind that doesn't need permission." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I've already made sure you'll never use yours again." Before I could respond, the mansion lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, and for a moment, I thought it was my imagination. Then I saw it. The generators in the basement, the cables running across the floors. He'd rigged something, though I didn't know what. "What did you do?" I demanded. "Oh, you'll see," he said with that same eerie calm. "I told you I'd make this place mine, completely." He turned and walked toward the grand staircase, his voice echoing. "Even if I have to take it down to the ground." Panic surged through me. "Daniel, stop!" I shouted, following him down the hall. The humming grew louder, turning into a low rumble. The floor beneath us vibrated. "You can't destroy it!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. "This is our family's home." He looked at me, eyes burning. "Not anymore." And then, somewhere deep below us, something exploded. The blast threw me backward, heat and smoke filling the corridor. I coughed, my ears ringing, my vision spinning. The power cut out completely, plunging the mansion into darkness except for the flicker of firelight licking the walls. "Daniel?" I screamed, stumbling through the haze. I could hear him coughing too, shouting something I couldn't make out. I followed his voice down the stairs, through the smoke, until I found him near the basement door, half collapsed, his face pale, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him up. "Come on!" He shook his head weakly. "Leave it!" "It's done." "No," I cried. "You can't, it's mine," he whispered. "If I can't have it, no one can." His words were swallowed by another explosion. This one smaller, but enough to shake the floor again. The mansion groaned as flames climbed higher, devouring everything our family built. I dragged him out the side door, coughing, gasping for air, as the house burned behind us. By dawn, the mansion was gone. The land still stood, untouched beneath the ashes. Daniel survived, but barely. The investigation labeled it an electrical accident. They never found evidence of his sabotage. The insurance covered nothing, and his debts consumed what was left of his fortune. He moved away, broke and bitter, and for the first time in our lives, silence truly settled between us. I stood alone on that land for weeks after, staring at the charred remains of what once was, and realizing the truth my parents must have known all along. Houses can be rebuilt. Money fades. But the ground beneath, the foundation of who we are, that's eternal. I didn't lose anything that night. I inherited something far greater than a mansion or a title. I inherited strength, the kind my parents wanted me to find. Now, when I walk across that empty field, I can almost hear Mom's voice in the wind, telling me she's proud. The land still breathes, still holds the echoes of laughter, the roots of that old oak tree that once stood tall. And though Daniel destroyed the house, he could never touch what mattered most. The soil still remembers who it belongs to, and so do I.